Okay. And
all right. Hi everyone. How are you guys doing? There's just a few of you guys, so I guess we're getting a little close and personal today. So my name's Olivia. I'm a computer science grad student here. I'm one of the organizers of Q's Hacks. How many of you guys have signed up for that? You? Nice. No, you guys totally should, because it's a great opportunity to learn some new skills like you will here today, hopefully. And it's totally free, and you get food and some nice company swag and stuff, so that's nice. But today's workshop is about Coding 101. It's just a really basic and elementary introduction to programming. So I just wanted to ask, kind of gauge the room, what people's experience has been at least. So how many of you guys have done programming before? Everyone? Okay. Yeah, me too. So I'm not sure how much you guys will learn from this, but hopefully at least one thing. Maybe. Have you guys done Python before? A little? Okay, well, I at least have some resources for you guys that will make it a lot easier to learn it, I think, and use it. Some resources like cheat sheets and stuff that I found online that I think will be helpful. Okay, let me just make this full screen. So, oh yeah, also you can sign up for Q's Hacks at qshacks.github.io. So it's just a little plug there. Okay, it's not this one. First thing, if you don't know what coding is, it's basically writing programs, which are a series of really simple instructions that tell a computer what to do. And so you might wonder why we would want to tell a computer to do something for us when we can just do it, but that's really because computers are very, very fast at executing these steps. So while something might take you or me, a few minutes to do, like do some math or something, computer can just do it like that, and you'll have your answer in just a second. So I'm sure you guys have written programs before and you see it runs pretty quickly. So that's where the usefulness, I think, of programming comes in. Here we have a very simple program. It just asks the user for a number and then tells them if it's even or odd. And so this is Snap. It's like this tool that it makes it very easy to conceptualize what a program is and what programming is, which is basically you can put together really small sequential steps and then make something larger. So like if I'm ever teaching programming to kids, I always use this to let them know that it's just telling instructions and putting things together, and then you can make the computer do something cool. So I don't think I'm going to go through and build this whole thing, but basically when you click this, then it asks you to enter a number. You do, and it tells you if it's even or odd. And so most programs don't look like this, as you guys probably know. They look like that, but you can see that there's a lot of parallels between these two programs. See, there's the line where it asks for a number, and then next it takes that number and does this evaluation on it. I'm sure you guys know what modulo is, the percentage sign. Yeah, okay. So this is the same program in a few different languages. So you can see that we have Python up there, and then we have JavaScript, C++, and Java. So you can see that they all look pretty much the same, almost the same, especially the two up there, Python and JavaScript. And yeah, so one thing that this tells us is that once you know one language, it's pretty easy to learn others. It's more just annoying because you have to look up different function names when you are using that different language. So you can see here that the logical steps saying if, this, and else is present in every single one of the programs, no matter the language, and it's pretty much just the input and output functions that are different. So let's see, what else I was going to say here. Yeah, that's the main difference between these, as you can see. And then one other thing I was going to mention, but you guys probably know, is that Python doesn't have these brackets here that you can see in all of the other programs, and that's because Python goes off of white space, and that's how it tells which code belongs to which segment. So what code is under if and else. I'm sure you guys know how that works. But yeah, so we can see here there is a ton of different programming languages. And so I know one thing that I wondered when I first started doing programming is like, why is there so many languages? Like what could the differences between all of them be that you need so many? And it is overwhelming, I think, to some people when they start programming that there's so many. But really, let me see. Yeah, it's not too bad because you can make a lot of things in a lot of different languages. So a lot of the time it doesn't really matter which language you've chosen. What are you doing? Charging it? Okay. But yeah, some languages are better than others depending on what application you're trying to do, like what your project is. For example, if you're doing web development, then most people use like JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. SQL is a language specifically for databases. Let me see, what else is up there? Swift and C#, I think, is for Apple development. And then, yeah, so there's pretty like specialized applications for some of them, but pretty much any of the 4 that I showed in this last slide would be good for most projects. And so, yeah, I think that covers everything there. I'm going to focus mostly on Python for the rest of this presentation. But yeah, pretty much any language that you pick, you can make do with because there's always documentation available online. You can literally just search the name of the language and then documentation. It has like a homepage or something. They probably have some tutorials and stuff. So whatever language you end up going with for your project, should be able to find some good stuff online for that. So here I just wanted to ask if there's any questions about specific languages, languages that are up here, or anything else related to picking a language for a project. No? No? Okay. What's next? So Next, how do you write a program? Do you guys, you all said you've done programming, so you're comfortable with some specific editor or IDE. You guys all have one that you guys typically use. Any questions about that? No? Okay. Yeah, I usually use Visual Studio Code and just run stuff in my terminal. That's what I found is easiest for me, but as you can see, there's a lot of different editors and IDEs to choose from. And then we just have some, benefits of using IDEs. They have autocomplete, IntelliSense, and automatic brackets, and it tells you if you're doing something wrong. But you can also write programs in Notepad and TextEdit and Word and stuff like that. But yeah. So this next part is about how you go about writing the algorithm of a program. So pretty much my process, at least, is you first have to understand exactly what the problem that you're trying to solve is, exactly what you want the computer to do. Well, I guess maybe not exactly yet, but in general, know what you want the computer to do. Step 2, break down the problem or task into smaller steps, and then, or like as small of steps as possible. So then maybe after that, you can see how to write code for some of those steps. So I would go ahead and do that. And then maybe some of the steps you can't really see a clear path coding-wise to write that. So then you would go and break those down more until you sort of see what to do or see what you need to find out what to do, if that makes sense. And so then you just find out how to write those, write them, go along, and of course testing your code along the way is good. Probably preferred over just writing it all and then testing it, but I just wrote that as the 5th step. So any questions about this slide? No? Okay. You guys do something similar to this, I'm sure, when you write? Yeah? Okay. So next I had a quick activity, just writing the algorithm for a number guessing game. So basically, like, the computer comes up with a number, say between 1 and 10, and then the user has to guess the number. The computer tells them if they got the right answer or not. So, does anyone want to suggest an algorithm that we could follow to write this? No? That's fine. So this one is pretty simple. We just have the computer choose a random number and then ask for input, asking for a guess from the user. And then in this really simple version, we can just report whether the user has guessed that successfully or not. So then I was going to go ahead and write this little program. Do you guys want to see that? It'd probably be like 5 lines or something. Do you guys have an idea of how you would write this? Yeah? Yeah. You? Yeah? Okay. I thought you looked a little confused, so I don't know. I don't mean anything like that, but yeah. So then we can go ahead and write that. Yeah. And then running a program, once you have a Python file, you can run it in your terminal, which is what I usually do. So the command to do that is just Python and then the file name .py. But you have to make sure to go to the correct directory that it's in by navigating using the change directory Unix command. Are you guys familiar with Unix and the terminal? Yeah, so there is also like the command prompt if you have Windows, which I'm sure you guys know. And then I also included the ways to compile and run these other languages. So I think for Java and C++, you have to have these compilers installed, so it won't work right away on your computer if you don't have it installed. But yeah, and then JavaScript you run with Node. And then if you're using an IDE, usually they just have a compile button and sometimes just a run button. I don't know. I don't really use IDEs that much. But I'm sure if you guys use them, then you know how to run a program. So yeah, then I was going to go over these coding concepts that show up in pretty much every language, at least object-oriented languages. So I'll go through that really quickly. Yeah, because I'm sure you guys are familiar with these. They're very basic. So first of all, comments, they don't do anything. So you can use them to explain your code, break it up, temporarily take out a piece of code if you want to see if that's causing an issue. And I personally also like to use them to plan my algorithm, like I was saying before, writing things down in steps. I just do that straight in my editor with comments and then fill out the actual code underneath. So that's something that works nicely for me, at least. And then for Python specifically, single line comment is a pound symbol and multi-line is 3 quote marks. Yeah. Variables, I'm sure you know what those are. You store some data in them and then you can use it later. Functions, it's like a prepackaged bit of code that performs one thing, so you define it and then you can use it later on in your program. So it makes things more concise. You should definitely put things in functions if a piece of code becomes really long and it's like taking up an entire page or like your entire screen. Definitely break it up into functions because that will make it a lot more readable and it'll make it easier if something goes wrong and you have to debug. I find it's easier if it's organized better that way in functions. But yeah, make sure to always check the documentation for built-in functions before you go and like try and write one, because sometimes it can just save you some time. If you don't have to write a function, you can just use a built-in one. And control structures, so these are your if, else, things that control the flow of execution in your code based on logical operators. Yeah, so you can see some examples of that here. While You guys know what all these are? Yeah, yeah, okay. Interestingly, I don't think that switch exists in Python. It doesn't? Yeah. I kind of wish it did sometimes, but anyway. So next, the basic data types and structures. We have integers, which are like whole numbers, floats, which are decimal numbers. We have strings and booleans. And then there's arrays, which is like a list of data. I mean, can be pretty much any type of data. And you can access the different elements using the index. So, okay. And as you know, in most languages, they're index starting at 0, and you can represent matrices as an array of arrays. So here I have a little example of that. We see that this array is one array that has 3 arrays inside of it. And so if we got the first element of this array, then it would be this first list 1, 2, 3, and then we can specify a particular cell in that matrix by using these 2 indices. So then there are dictionaries and objects. So they're called dictionaries in Python, and in JavaScript they're called objects. So it's basically like a list, but instead of a value being associated with an index number, it's associated with some other key. Like, I think in Python, the keys can be anything really, but usually they're strings. So yeah, any questions about dictionaries, anything like that? No. And then a quick overview of classes. Conceptually, they're just like a blueprint for any type of object. The example that I have here is like a human class. So we see that there are variables and functions. So examples of attributes of a person could be their height, weight, hair color, or mood. And the functions of a class is just things that it can do. So for a person, it would be maybe an eat function or go to sleep, anything that a person could do. And then during the program, so you define the class, define all of the attributes that an instance of the class should have, and then the things that it can do, and then once you're in the program, then instances of the class are created. I'm sure you guys learned about these, but any questions? No. Okay. So this is the last really general thing before we start looking at Python a little more. So the internet is pretty much your best friend when it comes to coding and programming, just because there's a ton of information out there. Documentation and reference is really helpful, especially for finding built-in functions and like libraries with functions that you want to use. If you're running into an error or some other kind of bug, there's a good chance that someone on the internet has run into exactly the same thing and posted about it, asking for help. So you can look around for that. There's tons of fun libraries that you can use for any language, especially Python. There's tons of libraries for a bunch of different things. So if you're trying to think of a project or anything to do because you're bored, it would probably be a good idea to just go and look at what Python libraries exist, and then you can probably just think of something to do based off one of those. And like I said, debugging, it's a good thing to look on the internet for if you have random questions, whatever. And then down here are some good sites that I have visited many times in the past 4 years. So Stack Overflow, W3 Schools is especially good for like web development sort of things. I know they have a lot of tutorials about like JavaScript, Node.js, and like HTML and CSS. So it has really good references for web development. Geeks for Geeks, I feel like is pretty good, especially for practice with algorithms, or like if you have a coding interview coming up, there's a lot of practice stuff on there, and it's explained pretty well, I think. And then Tutorials Point is also a good reference site. So yeah, that has been my experience with those sites, so that's pretty good. Okay, now I'll show you this little Python cheat sheet that I found the other day. Let me see. I think I have to, actually I'm just gonna look it up. Because it was one of the first few, things on here. And I think I looked through a few, and it was probably the best one that I found. But sorry for downloading this on your computer safe, but yeah. So I thought that this one would be really good for teaching to beginners because it has like literally pretty much everything that you'd need in a very basic program. So I was just going to go through here and mention conventions that weren't really talked about in the conceptual slides that I showed earlier. But I guess you guys probably know most of these things. If there's anything here that looks weird or you want me to explain, I can do that. So just let me know. Let's see. Yeah, so this is a pretty thorough guide, I think, and a good cheat sheet. If you use reference sheets very much, then you might want to take a look at this one, maybe save it to your computer. But yeah, so there is that. And then other than that, I just have some pretty basic Python coding exercises. If you guys want to go through them, if you guys are familiar with programming, it probably shouldn't take too long for you to finish them, but you totally don't have to because they're pretty easy. I did it in like 30 minutes today, but yeah, so that is pretty much all I have for you guys. Like I said, it was just a very basic introduction, but if you guys have any questions related to this or just like in general or about QSACs, I'm here. So yeah, yeah, that's all I have. I don't know. But yeah, sign up for QSACs, you guys. That's all. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.